Okay, so good morning. Just a minor technical issue that has me coming in a minute late today, but welcome to the Parinama practice space. I'm Katie Bickford. I am the author, co-creator, and also the founder of the Parinama method. I used to be an executive. I also used to be a person that did a lot of esoteric stuff, traveled and lived around the world, practicing and learning, and as a student of a lot of really fantastic teachers and the principles of like breath work, meditation, yoga, and all sorts of other kind of weird stuff. But let's get into it. So today, in the Parinama practice space, where our intention is to create a consistent practice where we are uniting all the facets of our nervous system. We're uniting the cognitive part, the part that thinks it's always in control, the thinking, so-called thinking, the emotion, the feeling part, and also the physical, the movement, the reflexes, the physical reflexes. And so today's topic, as we continue through the introduction to the notion of what parinama is before we really dip into the practice. And full disclosure, my intention for doing these sessions, because they're not, so full disclosure, doing things live is not really optimized for YouTube. And so I'm doing these this way, um, even though the replays have been getting some watches, which is great. I love it. Would love it even more if there was some interaction. It really helps me to hear from people. And funny enough, when I was doing the readings, which were just these hyper super freestyle, um, you know, like on rating on a sliding scale of level of chaotic, I got a lot more interaction, and so I missed that. But I will take what I can get right now. And back to why I'm doing this is I'm workshopping what will ultimately become something that is a parinama for um, really like starting out and being able to really clearly walk folks into this practice and what some of the fundamental tenets are of it, and then little by little, as like we work into the practical aspects of how it works, and then ultimately do it. Because the thing is that parinama is a practice that I think about for the person who's tried everything, like myself, who traveled the world and had been, had done it all from, therapy to meditation retreats to fasting to, yeah, like Kundalini to, I mean, like the list goes on. It's actually like so exhaustive. It's bizarro. Is that the thing that Parinama offers is the transform everything, which is that a lot of the models that we're operating under right now keep us fixated in the dysfunction. I have a lot of people now in my life who are always using the reference of I'm like this because talking about early familial dynamics. And while in Parinama, it may deceptively feel like this is where we go, but this is where we pass through to become liberated from that. So we are actually evaluating this stuff, finding the feelings, reclaiming the feelings, divesting ourselves consciously of the initial patterning and the source of it and the people who did it and the circumstances. We're coming to terms with those so that we can pass through it. So it's not a constant reference point, and that we have ownership of these facets and operations. We have operational ownership of the different facets of our nervous system. And so, as far as changing everything, I can, I'll speak from my own personal experience, and is that things that used to take up a lot of my energy, or at least my attention, are just gone. And I'm not going to get too much more into like what happens after, because that's for sort of it's not the purpose of today. So for today's topic, this week is our adaptations week. So we have gone through a couple of the different sort of pillars or the stacking of the Parinomiverse. And last week we talked about interruptions and stressors, which are the circumstances and events of early life that shape us. And so how do we get shaped? And what does the shaping, like, how does it show up? So we're going to talk about it this week. So today, what we're going to do is we're going to do a little more reading than we normally do. There's a couple of paragraphs I just think do the best job of explaining this stuff really succinctly. I'll try to read it in a way that it's actually interesting to listen to, so hopefully not monotone. And I've tried to cut out the stuff that I think is extra, because the book has it all. It's extra. So I've just picked the paragraphs that I think are meaningful for what we're going to discuss. So we're going to discuss how we adapt in early life, and the functioning of it this week. And then tomorrow we're going to discuss the dilemmas. So as if you've been following along, we talk about how the nervous system was built kind of layer by layer with very specific facets of what it feels like to be you on the day-to-day, like I guess the day-to-day level. But yeah, I don't know. I don't know if that analogy carries through. And so the dilemmas, as they're outlined and as we'll discuss tomorrow, are hub by hub. So, you're talking about like physical insecurity or relative to physical security, emotional availability, your feelings of powerlessness or feeling powerful, feeling worthy, or unlovable, fundamentally unlovable. So these are some of the dilemmas that arise from the interrupting and stressing aspects of the various hubs. And with looking at adaptations, we begin to see that what we believe to be the reality for these things is actually something that was worked to adapt us to an early situation, socialization, event, whatever. And this is when we start to tease this thing open. When we're talking about transform everything, we're talking about transform everything, because once you can see into this stuff and understand that it is absolutely not a fixed fact, and that you are, in fact, incredibly lovable, extraordinarily worthy, powerful beyond your comprehension, truly, and that your emotions, like tapping into them and having the access to feel more, actually makes life extraordinarily more enjoyable in very simple ways. And that physical security is a feeling that is embodied and not something that's necessarily like exactly possible to be obtained from the world around us, because the fact of the matter is the world itself has instability and danger and all sorts of things. So what we're trying to do is embody, back down to the third hub, is a feeling of safety. Anyhow, and then on Thursday, the last day of this week, we're going to talk about the shadows, but in a very specific way, as they relate to adapting. Okay, so let's read a little bit. And before we read, just let's do a quick check-in. Just how are you feeling today? And so let's just, on a scale of 1 to 10, how are you feeling mentally? If you want to put it in the chat, I would love to make this a little bit more interactive than it normally is. Right now, mentally, I would say I'm actually like an 8 or 9. I'm feeling surprisingly good. I think one of the things is I just launched a podcast, and it's been an incredibly like enjoyable, but a lot of work. And it's been activating kind of a part of me that gets very fixated on creating something. So it kind of drained me a bit. So mentally today, I woke up feeling really good. Emotionally, same thing, pretty good. Physically, probably about a 7. Been a little sedentary. Looking forward to getting outside, enjoying the sunshine today. So yeah, please I'd love to know how you're feeling today. This is a really fun thing to do, to sync up with somebody that you are with, kids, friends, colleagues. It's pretty neutral, so you don't really need to worry about, like, sort of appropriateness. It's just a little bit on the intimate side because you're talking about how you feel, which isn't exactly the kind of thing that we do with some people. Okay, and let's just take a deep breath in together. So let's breathe in through the nose and just kind of expand your chest. Hold for a couple seconds and then exhale through the mouth, like blowing out the candle. It feels nice. I just can't help but do one more. Holding there. It feels nice to just kind of stretch out there and then and even noticing, and this is something I just kind of am sort of exhausting as a about, but just notice how the inhaling, how that's like awakening and enlivening, and that the exhaling is softening and releasing. And so when we're using breath to, up our game, that we're actually focusing on the side of the breath and emphasizing it and elongating the side that we actually really want to activate. So I'm going to read a little bit. Hang in there. I'm going to try to read it like a real good orator. So hang tight. We're talking about adaptations and holding patterns, and then we're going to look at a couple little pictures. We're going to do an exercise at the end of this. So if you have something right now that is bothering you and taking up a lot of your mind space, this will be a good exercise for you. So that is at the end of this. So the adaptations and holding patterns. And if you want to go deeper, we are going to be skimming the surface. I've pulled out a couple excerpts here that I think are meaningful for this conversation this morning. But pages 27 to 34 in the book go a bit deeper. And they also talk about sort of the dynamic movement and charge, so intensity, which is kind of probably a 2.0 on this topic. But for today, we are going to just stay with the basics because there is a lot to consider just when we're even skimming the surface here. So when we experience stress from interruptions that is either intense and acute, or low grade but ongoing, we adapt so that we can maintain safety, dignity, and belonging for our survival. But often, without our knowing it, the behaviors that helped us survive in early life can hold us back as adults. Adaptations and holding patterns are often maladapted outside the environment that caused them in both childhood and into adulthood. So initially our behavior changed, but sometimes if the interruption was severe enough or went on for too long, the adaptation became a holding pattern that got coded into the physical and psychological reflexes of our body mind. So children are completely reliant on the care of others and innocent as they adapt to do what's required to survive and make the best of their environment. People who grew up in stable environments may not understand or may lack compassion for adapted behaviors, mislabeling them as moral shortcomings. By the way, I don't know a lot of people who don't have adaptations. I mean, one note I'll make is that the notion of like mental health with this is often brought up, but this is actually worth bringing up, is that, when I was coming up as a young adult, I felt like I was very uniquely flawed. And it was like this thing where I really felt like I had a secret about myself that was like, God, if anybody knew how much I'm masking, like what I considered to be high levels of unique dysfunction, that I'd be discovered and sort of cast out of the kingdom, whatever group of friends or profession that I was in. And the thing is it wasn't until I became a leader, and then an executive, where I had teams under me, and I just saw how universal, and also the access of being able to see it from that vantage point. When you're on the teams, it's really hard to see other people in the viewpoint that you get from being a leader within the group, and as it honestly kind of should be. But that, I think, one of the things, and this is one of the reasons I use adaptations, holding patterns, interruptions, and stressors, and I don't use clinical language, is because to normalize this is so important to me, because working with anyone, I have found that these are patterns that all people have some version of having created, and being like having to figure out how to manage and adapt with in adulthood. And it's just a thing. You don't it you know It's like what trauma is, I think, there's trauma, and there's also just growing up in the world, and the fact that your true and your natural inclinations aren't going to be perfectly synced in with the environment that you were born into. So, the here we go. So, okay, so adaptation is a behavior pattern of either inflating, overcompensating, or shrinking, avoiding, that protects a developmental dilemma within the hub. Again, we'll talk about developmental dilemmas, I think, tomorrow. So in each hub, there's a survival reflex that supports us in small doses, but it can become a shadow when it takes an ongoing fixated hold on our behavior. In the adaptations and holding patterns section in each chapter in part 2, one for each hub, I discussed the hub's shrinking adaptation, inflating adaptation, and an additional theme or two related to the holding pattern. And as mentioned, when we're talking about adapting in a particular hub, there are two primary modes, directionalities that we will take on. And let's start with the first hub. Let's talk about your physical security, your sense of physical security. That is infant level. So it's feeling that the physical world is safe as your little being is coming into it, and that it's responsive, that you'll be kept warm, that your needs will be like responded to in a way that is, reasonable to extraordinary. And so if our environment, and this is for reasons, vilifying people, there's a point of accountability that can be helpful, but that you can't go back and have these people heal you. They are not going to be able to heal you. So continuing to turn to them as a narrative is actually, it can be satisfying, but it's also a trap. And so what we're looking at like, okay, well, now that I'm the, captain of this operation, it's looking at, okay, so as a child, if my physical needs were not responded to in a way that really worked for me, or if I'd really so an example, distracted, exhausted caregivers, a lot of other things going on for a million different reasons, that range from nefarious to just kind of benign, but just real, is that, a baby is going to either overcompensate. So in this case, we'd say get louder. If they're being, sort of ignored, it's like you either get louder, or maybe you adopt by becoming quieter and becoming an easier baby, so that it's like your caregiver actually maybe like finds you more agreeable to deal with and holds you. And so as an adult versioning of this is that thinking about overcompensating. So overcompensating is like keeping yourself safe by having more than you need. And that's the inflating. And the shrinking adaptation is avoiding the need altogether. So to shrink is to basically, like, it's to avoid the, like, is to be in a bit of denial about the need. Both are forms of denial, but there's two different ways of kind of considering, like, sort of a strategy. And so one example, so how this plays out as adults. I mean, I don't know if you've ever watched the show Hoarders, but in Hoarders, what you see like there's always a backstory that has to do with loss. And when I've watched that show, I've just been like completely on the edge of my seat as a Parinama person, because it always is revealed that they lost something. And so that was where the hoarding sort of took off. So loss. The other side of that is to be shrinking, which is to be like, I actually don't need that much. And that's to be austere to the point that it's punishing. So, and these are on the like furthest ends of the spectrum, is to just basically diminish your needs to the point that it's like, it's the compensation is like, I didn't need it anyway. So it's actually not that big of a deal. And this can be like taking up as little space as possible. Sometimes it's like sort of like eating, but even belongings, like having fewer belongings, so and yeah, so I mean, I'll end it at that, because it feels like I'm about to kind of like draft off into sort of a tangent. So in the interest of time, I think we've covered enough for this. I'm actually not going to do any picture time today, just simply because I really want to make sure that we get the chance to do this exercise. And we've got about 8 minutes left here. The only thing I want to point out as it relates to the tangle from earlier sessions is that the events and circumstances create reflexes. And this is where we're getting into like being able to see the evidence of the reflexes. So it's seeing it, and then, there's some kind of like tracing back and coming to a cognitive understanding of it. And then when we're doing the techniques and exercises and even bringing consciousness to these things, that we make them more adaptive. So they don't completely go away, but their rigidity and their hold and their fixated at nature of them, of our adaptations softens, so that we can actually kind of be a little bit more like flexible to larger environments. And sometimes they do go away, by the way, but okay, let's not go too crazy here. So, all right. So for the exercise today, this is called the classic diagnostic. It's on page 273, and it works really well if we are talking through it. But in the practicality of the forum we're in today, we are going to do it this way. So what I'd like you to do is, for a specific situation that's going on in your life. So if you have something right now that's absorbing a lot of your thinking, and it's feeling like it's really overwhelming you, and you're kind of in like sort of repeating like patterns, or escalating and over rationalizing, and the other thing was they had said this, and it's like just a natural thing. It happens. And this can be work, this can be with a partner, this can be a friend, this can be a neighbor, whatever. If there's a situation that's going on and you're like, I just don't know how to address it, we're going to do a little bit of an exercise to see if we can unpack it a little bit, because, multiple hubs are always affected when we face a challenge, but choosing the one with the highest, where there is actually like the most charge, helps us actually get to the source of where we are being activated, and it helps us actually interact with the situation in a way where we can be more constructive in a manner that gets us a result that satisfies us a bit more. So we'll see if we can accomplish that today. So this exercise, I'm going to read for 2 or 3 sentences, and then we're going to get into it. This exercise is a triage, which allows you to prioritize to take effective action when multiple stressful factors get tangled up, as they often do in an intense situation. This exercise can reduce this sense of overwhelm and lack of clarity about how to proceed, and replace it with greater certainty about what to do next. In many cases, emotions, the second hub, can crowd out a more specific aspect of the issue. Now, this helps if you have a pen handy. In fact, I would recommend it. I don't know if it's entirely possible to do this exercise without a pen handy. So, or your phone. So in a column from, top to bottom, write 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So we're going to rate this because you're really like the thing that's important is you're going to want the record of rating these things because we're going to be looking at this holistically. And so on a scale of 1 to 10, we are going to be rating each facet as it relates to how we feel about the situation. So we're putting ourselves into the feeling of the situation and we're going to isolate the various aspects of it. And then we're going to look at the aspect that has the highest score. And it often is surprising. It's often surprising to me because when I'm working with people using this, I'm often surprised because I think I know what it is and then it's something totally different. And that's one of the things that's great about this is there isn't as much interference about other people's opinions about the situation. This is where you can kind of find it in your own sensory experience and as it relates to you directly and not people's advice and perception of what's actually happening. Because there's this whole thing called projection when people are telling you the things that are going on with them. So, okay, so if you have your pen and paper ready, and we'll get to this. So, consider the situation, and now I want you to consider, I guess, like bring the situation to mind, and the consideration is the first hub is my physical safety feeling threatened? Does this situation make me afraid that I can't pay my bills or take care of my body and or put my physical health and safety, or does it put my physical health and safety at risk? So give yourself a rating on a scale of 1 to 10 on that, like how strong that feeling is for this particular situation. And you can rate in every single category in a situation, but what we're really looking for is the triage to pull the things forward that are have like the most resonance. Now, before we do the second hub, name your predominant emotion as it relates to the situation. And what we're doing is we're isolating that out. We're pulling that predominant emotion out and we're just naming it. And then we're going to assess the hub. So do you feel angry? Do you feel frustrated? Do you feel whatever? What is that? And we're just going to take that out and we're going to try to compartmentalize that. And the next is my ability to find enjoyment and satisfaction being affected? So my ability to find enjoyment and satisfaction affected. Give yourself 1 through 10. Third is my power threatened? Is my ability to act on my own behalf, to be appreciated or to be respected being interfered with? 1 to 10. 4, are my relationships and or social credibility being threatened? Once again, 1 through 10, and just look for where there's like it's like you're kind of using sort of an emotional meter on this, like where this notion feels very activating, and try and so if there's this sense like everything's a 10, it's like you're not helping yourself. So it's or if you're like everything's a 1, so this could be an inflating and shrinking thing. This is more just like this is just between you and the piece of paper to really assess this. So the fifth hub is my ability to express myself with integrity being interfered with. Is the truth being kept from me? Like for resonance, like how does that feel to you? 1 through 10. 6, are my perspective and insight being respected and validated? Are things being hidden from me? And so number 6, give yourself a 1 through 10. And then for the seventh hub, am I being censored or is there information I'm receiving being censored? So taking a peek over your numbers and noticing, and if there's any that you feel need to be changed or shifted, be like, actually, I think this one's bigger now that I've evaluated everything, or this one's smaller. So tweaking it a little bit and then looking at it and thinking and realizing like part of what we're doing is we're pulling forward the part of it that is like, because these situations heap together a lot of like emotions, a lot of adaptations. And so it can be really hard for figuring out a constructive way to address it. And to address it isn't about, will they understand? It's literally, we're looking at like, okay, what's the part of this for me that needs to be addressed for me to be able to progress in this, for me to feel better about it. So if you feel like, oh my gosh, I can't like make my, I'm scared that it's going to affect my livelihood. I'm scared it's going to affect that. It's like, okay, that's the part of this we're addressing. And so because this is, I'm not speaking about specifics with anyone, all I can do is kind of like point to this stuff to realize like, we're pulling the emotion out to be dealt with separately. And we're looking at the very specific aspect of this that you really need to have resolved to feel better about it. And then you might go back and start, kind of addressing the other facets of the conflict. But one of the first things that you're doing is finding the thing that's like, okay, underneath all the feelings, repeating thoughts, the beliefs, the aggravations, this is the thing that is really getting to me. So that is it for today. Thank you for joining me. Tomorrow we will be getting back up on the old steed and riding the dilemmas train. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you hopefully tomorrow. Love ya. Bye.